The government of President Mnangagwa now has gone worse than the government of Robert Mugabe. Beating an opposition leader in broad daylight, it shows that we're at the lowest ever possible ebb in our democracy.
That's a chilling reflection from a Zimbabwean opposition political figure and a constitutional lawyer.
It is in reference to the government crackdown against those opposed to the constitutional changes that could extend President Mnangagwa's term to 2030.
Now, the government argues that the constitutional change is necessary to enhance political stability and policy continuity.
They want to consolidate their power through extending the president's term. And it is not everyone who is doing that. A group of persons in the ruling party who stand to benefit by the continued stay of the president in office.
Presidential term limit is a constitutional safeguard, but is one term of 5 years enough to allow development programs to be implemented to completion?
And do Zimbabweans think extending the term from 5 to 7 years can help the government fulfill its promises?
That's an interesting question. You know, you look at terms in Russia, they're like 6 years. You look for terms in Zimbabwe, they're 5. In America, they're 4 or 5. Is it a term thing? No, I think it's a execution thing.
And that's true. Leadership can be in office for 2 years, and with proper strategies and favorable environment, massive changes can happen.
But others can be in office for more than 40 years, and all we get from them is the promise of building a good road, hospital, or a school that has taught for over 2 decades.
Zimbabwe's presidential term limit, that is our topic of discussion under the Baobab today.
Hey,
yes, it's another day.
Hi, George.
Hi, Mimi. Hello and a very warm welcome. This is Under the Baobab. They call me George Okachi.
And I am Mimi Mefonewu. Under the Baobab, we always make complex stories personal.
Yes, and we make it personal every week. We speak to policy makers, political leaders and change makers across Africa.
Particularly on Fridays.
Yes.
And for those who have been keeping the rendezvous or appointment every Friday, waiting to see the latest episodes, we appreciate you all. And today we are taking a closer look at Zimbabwe. You know, we've been there before.
Yes.
But it's necessary we take a look at the country again. A country that was once filled with hope, especially when people saw the reign of Robert Mugabe ending.
Yes, indeed. We remember there was a disputed election that led to a constitutional change that heralded, new hope and new changes. But nearly a decade later, many Zimbabweans are asking whether that promise of change has really materialized.
And those are the questions that we always ask under the Baobab. To respond to some of these questions, we had to speak to Professor Lovemore Madhuku. He is joining us under the Baobab today. He is a leader of the Opposition National Constitutional Assembly, the NCA.
Yes, and to our viewers, he is not new to Zimbabwe's political battles. He spent decades campaigning for constitutional reforms. And Mimi, whenever we talk about Professor Lovemore, many people say he doesn't have the, mobilization astute like Nelson Chamisa to, mobilize and whip, support.
Yeah.
But he is like the constitutional conscience of, Zimbabwe because he speaks constitution.
Because he also challenges a lot of legal, some legal policies that are put in place by the government.
Yeah.
For instance, he actually led a movement that defeated a government-backed constitution in the year 2000. You remember in the year 2000, the government of Robert Mugabe
yes,
was trying to use this referendum to some sort of consolidate its power and the ZANU-PF party. But about 54% of Zimbabwean's population voted against this referendum.
Yes.
And you know that a referendum can only be valid if 50 plus 1% of the population vote in favor.
In favor of the
referendum. But if 54% say no,
yes,
that's where it went wrong. And Professor Lovemore Madhuku was one of the major faces against this particular referendum.
Yes, and it's so interesting to look at the consistency. Like he's advocated for constitutionalism in the country, and of course we saw that victory after him, calling for masses to to rally behind, opposing this particular constitution. But one thing stood out, Mimi, during his opposition to, such changes, he's always advocated for people-led constitutional changes.
Right.
And one key major issue has been the presidential term limit.
The presidential term limit, of course, it's come at a huge cost.
Yes.
Because he's been arrested several times because of that. Just recently, he and activists from his own political party were being beaten up and arrested by security forces. Somewhat like Professor Madhuku is old, but being beaten
up,
because he's challenging the status quo and challenging constitutional change.
Yes.
So he was beaten up, and he's been speaking up still after the incident.
Yeah, and I mean, Mimi, this is an act of, intimidation against those who are opposed to what the government is trying to front. And remember, when they passed the 2013 constitution, it heralded, changes of, new hope of respect to, civic spaces.
Right.
But now, beating up an opposition figure, when you spoke to him, what did he say about that?
So, yes, we discussed a lot of things. Particularly, we started to talk about this meeting, why he was beaten up, and how he feels, as well as other opposition party leaders in Zimbabwe. When this happens, what does it tell us about democracy in the country? Let's hear what he told us.
It is very clear what it shows. It shows that we're at the lowest ever possible ebb in our democracy. We were attacked not just in broad daylight, but at our private head office, the head office of our political party, which is a well-known place, and that it was also well known that we were there to meet as a political party, and they had invited everyone to be able to have their inputs. We were clearly preparing, and everyone knew that's what we were doing, preparing our response, which response was already known, that we were opposed to the bill. So yes, I was beaten in broad daylight, and I think that they are people that think that that is the way one must run a country.
Would you describe this as a political intimidation, or does it point to a deeper breakdown of the rule of law in Zimbabwe? Perhaps even a slide towards authoritarian rule?
I think it is both. It's both, for example, the deterioration in the rule of law situation, but it is also at the same time an attempt to send shockwaves to those that might want to oppose the bill. So you pick on a person who is prominent enough, known enough in the country, a person whose views are also clear enough that they are in opposition, a person that some people might want to look forward to them being their voice in a way. You show them as an example that if we can do this to this person, what about you? We will do this to anyone who would want to challenge us.
But Professor, some Zimbabweans say that the opposition appears silent or almost absent in public life. Could intimidation be one of the reasons it sometimes looks that way?
There's a very strong opposition here, but its visibility and its capacity to sustain itself is affected almost exclusively by the intimidation. In this country, it takes much more. You have to have your conviction, that is not enough. If you want to express yourself, that is not enough. You must also be prepared to face a threat to your life. The ruling party creates a situation where the country is always at war against those that are opposing it. So it's a state of war every day.
State of war every day.
Yes.
So President Emmerson Mnangagwa is 83 and he has served 2 5-year terms as president of Zimbabwe. And many are expecting that he should be able to step down, when his current mandate ends or when the next election is taking place in Zimbabwe. And that might not even be the case because we've seen leaders who always want to be, some African leaders want to be in power forever.
But we can't borrow a president from, examples of, say, Cameroon or Uganda.
You never know.
Maybe he may step down. Maybe he may step down, Mimi.
Yeah, that would be good news for us.
Yes, but more substantially, of course, there is a lot of malice being seen within this, proposed constitutional amendment to, increase the presidential term limit. Currently, Zimbabweans elect their president for, we could say, 2 terms. which with every term going for 5 years, but now there is a proposed, agenda to make that to 7 years.
Yes.
And the proponents of this are saying it helps, to calm down the election fatigue and also ensure continuity. Personally, I feel it's a conversation Zimbabweans can have.
His supporters are claiming that it would just allow him to stay in power to 2030 and not more than that.
Yes.
But like you said, we never know. And experts and opposition leaders like Professor Madhuku are saying that it's some sort of a constitutional coup. And they are also saying that it's not going to happen because they don't believe that this is just some sort of a short-term plan by the government that is in place. In fact, we know how many years late Robert Mugabe stayed in power.
Yes.
And then simply succeeded by someone still from the ZANU-PF party. So people are very skeptical. Some Zimbabweans even say that it is standing on the way of the leadership change that they wanted to see in the country that they have been yearning for so many years.
But don't you think they should have a conversation about that, especially if a political, outfit like ZANU-PF is arguing that indeed 5 years is quite a short period to realize some implementation of, key projects.
Yes,
then therefore the need of maybe making it 7 years.
But he had served 2 terms before. What did he do as a president?
No, but you see, the Constitution is made for posterity. Maybe they're making this in future. They're visionary in terms of looking at, okay, we elect leaders, but not make it, let's not make it at 5 years. But
if you had worked
years.
in favor of your own people for the past 2 terms when you were in office,
yes,
they won't be arguing for the constitutional change that would simply have to give you just 1 more term in office. It simply means that Zimbabweans have had enough of certainly have had enough of President Mnangagwa and want change in government. But how constitutional is this move also? Because that's the conversation that we also had with Professor Madhuku to understand how constitutional this move is. Let's hear from him.
It is a problem in the sense that it wants to undermine the very basis of the Constitution. Now, what they want to do and what they are proposing to do is that the president will get an extra 2 years beyond the maximum of 10 years. Not with an election, there will be no election. Then alongside the president, all members of parliament who are currently in parliament will just get an extra 2 years in office. Our former president was able to be in charge of this country for 37 years. One of the reasons why we are where we are as a country is because of the allowance we gave to one person to be in power for 37 years. Once they change it in the proposal that they are making, they might actually keep changing. We might never have an election in the foreseeable future. And so that is unacceptable.
But the ruling party is saying that it's not meant to extend President Mnangagwa's tenure. And it is also arguing that the 2-year extension to 2030 is not technically a new term. What does the Constitution actually say? And would such an extension be gradually or be legally allowed?
It's not allowable. It's not even an issue of debate. It's not allowable. The Constitution is very clear. Any lawyer of a reasonable focus will tell you that the maximum period that a person can be president in Zimbabwe under the current Constitution is 10 years. That's a maximum. Even if you were to extend it by 3 months or 2 months, that will still be completely undemocratic. You can't just sit there as a group of people who are close to the president and are able to influence the thinking of parliament and then get that going. So they have no argument there.
So in your view, is there a clear reason why the ruling party is pushing to amend the constitution now?
They want to consolidate their power through extending the president's term. And it is not everyone who is doing that. We can't call it the ruling party. I think we should say that a clique, a group of persons in the ruling party who stand to benefit by the continued stay of the president in office beyond 2028 would want the president to stay. One must, of course, the media keeps saying the ruling party. I think that is being very polite to the ruling party because there are so many elements, so many people in the ruling party who do not want these things. But they would not be in a position to voice. They know how their party behaves. And even when we were beaten up, the message is more to the ruling party players than to other people.
Yes, of course, always soft-spoken, calm. but very
but saying a lot of things.
Yeah, very
that
firm in
like,
his assertion. And he says that the push for constitutional amendment is coming from just a small, group within the ruling party. And it's not a popular, feeling among Zimbabweans.
Yeah, and not entirely, members, all the members of the ZANU-PF party, but individuals who politically benefit from the president staying in power, which is what we are also...
Would you say they are selfish?
Yes, selfish in a way, because we also get to hear that a lot about Cameroon, that currently the country is just governed by a group of not up to 10 people who are benefiting politically and economically from what is happening. And you see there's been a lot of changes with Amit's reports that we could have the position of vice president, which is a development that we are closely following in Cameroon, to some sort of see how to take over power from the current government. That is certainly what is happening in Zimbabwe at the moment.
Yeah, but under the Baobab, we care about the people. And what are Zimbabweans saying about this? Our correspondent, Privilege Mushaniri, has been speaking to some of them, and here is what they think about this proposed constitutional change.
That's an interesting question. You look at terms in Russia, they're like 6 years. You look for terms in Zimbabwe, they're 5. In America, they're 4 or 5. Is it a term thing? I don't think it's a time thing. I think it's an efficiency thing, where we say people should actually execute what the mandate of the people is. Because you can have the people for the longest time who are poorly performing. You look at Trump right now. He has only been here for less than a year, but his term is already disastrous. You know what I mean? And then you look for people who've been there for a long time. I mean, the Chinese have had a lifetime presidency and they're thriving geopolitically.
Every new leader who will come in will have his own ideas, own objectives, and his own ideology. You have his time to input his way of thinking. Whereas if there's one leader in a long term, everything will go smoothly.
I think it is always very important, it's always very critical to have leadership renewal, because it allows the country to go forward.
Is Zimbabwe a true democracy? It still is a democracy, but we still haven't got some things right. We're not a perfect democracy. No, we're not. But I feel like the whole world as a whole is not a true democracy. You look at how America is behaving right now, how the whole world is behaving.
The challenge is that why we cannot say we are a true democracy is that there's an obsession from the ruling elite to make sure that there's no opposition in the country.
Well, in my own point of view, I think Zimbabwe is indeed a true democracy. Why? It's because we truly hold elections every 5 years. Apana, there's no time you hear that there's no election this time. There's always an election.
And Mimi, the beauty of Under the Baobab, and this is what I love the most, whenever we hear from people, we sort of, get diverse perspective, people, having diverse opinion about a particular subject. But what strikes me a lot about their sentiments is that they are contending that it is not about, the term limit per se, but rather efficiency. If a leader is there for 2 years and can deliver on promises made to the people, then it doesn't even harm for that leader to continue forever if he wants.
Which has probably certainly not been the case with Zimbabwe.
Yeah.
And you can also take away anything from the people, but not their constitution. When the constitution is tampered with, it's never received with open arms.
Yes.
We've seen situations in countries like Chad, Togo, Senegal, where people go to the streets when the constitutions are tampered with. And, it's generally the case in several African countries, and that's what we are seeing happening in Zimbabwe now.
Yes, and Professor Madhuku was vowed to mobilize against this particular the proposed constitutional change to, increase, to interfere with the term limit, because I'm sure he's coming from the backdrop that the previous constitution was to cure the issue of term limit, them having, a presidency that, prolonged to 37 years.
Right.
Yeah, so, but there are critics who are against his move and, questioning his, democracy within the opposition outfit.
Yes, there's always this saying that when you're pointing one finger. If I'm pointing at you, 4 fingers are pointing at me, or some of them. You cannot be preaching virtue and practicing vice in court. And people believe that Professor Madhuku has gotten to a point where there's some sort of need for transfer of leadership within his own party. And people are not seeing that happening. So how can he have that capability to question the government that is in place and overstaying leadership when he too is an overstayer in court also?
That's an interesting way of looking at it. But
you know, in Cameroon,
yes,
opposition leaders never resign from government. I don't know, from their parties, until the last key opposition leader died before the power was shifted to another person. I think it's a case of, I want to rule first before I step down.
Could be, but what did he say about the questions around his democracy within his political space?
I put that question to him. Let's find out what he said. You often criticize leaders for overstaying in power, yet critics say that you once changed the constitution of the National Constitutional Assembly, the party that you're currently leading. How do you respond to accusations that the opposition sometimes mirrors the leadership culture that it is condemning every day?
I have remained a leader of this organization as a political party for a long time, but it's not a state institution. But we commit ourselves to observing term limits within the state. But you cannot have a situation where the government keeps decimating the opposition by telling them that you have opposed us long enough, go away.
So if constitutional principles should apply to the president, shouldn't those same principles also apply to opposition leaders like yourself?
It should apply to the opposition leaders in their movements, who are democratic movements, but you cannot compare the president of the state. And what is at stake at the moment in Zimbabwe is not the behavior of ZANU-PF as a private entity. We are not interested in that. We are interested in our constitution as a country, and these are different clubs. I'm sure that if we go by the logic you are putting across, we will start hearing that the churches are not democratic, the trade unions are not democratic, you know, the opposition is not. I think that argument, we would reject it.
Let us also talk about late Robert Mugabe, whose rule you spent so many years opposing. Mugabe is gone, yet many Zimbabweans say that the political system looks very similar to what obtained that time and now. Why do you think that is the case?
The government of President Mnangagwa now has gone worse than the government of Robert Mugabe. Beating an opposition leader in broad daylight at a private venue is very different from under Mugabe. You could only get these kind of actions if you are in a public place, you are having a public protest, and so on. We are where we are now because our colleagues in both the ruling party and the opposition didn't agree with us in 2013 when we had said a constitution must come from the people. It must not be the product of the ruling political party. We allowed a situation where a constitution was actually written by a group of politicians and then put to the people. The only difference now between now and 2013 is that this ruling party doesn't want to go to a referendum. The ruling parties in 2013 went to a referendum. But that is not enough of a difference. The best scenario, which is why you said I've been fighting for a long time, the best scenario is where we take away from the ruling politician constitution making and come up with a truly democratic and independent constitution-making process which will ensure that ordinary people own the constitution. They will not allow any politician to tamper with it.
I like your question about, the opposition reproducing what they stand against,
right.
Them being there for a prolonged time. And
he said they are not in government.
And he makes sense to some extent, Mimi, that of course you can only ask for term limit when he has a constitutional office.
Right, but let's hear what people have to say in the comment section about that. That was a tough conversation, and when we have tough discussions like that, what do we do under the Baobab?
Yeah, we have the beauty of having, under the Baobab tree, where we retreat under the shades of this beautiful tree, and we get to know, our guest on the other side, Professor Madhuku, away from his, opposition and politics,
right.
Mobilization. Who is he?
What is your favorite traditional Zimbabwean meal?
Here we have sadza, which is, prepared from meal. So sadza and roast beef. That would be the best thing for me.
Of course, we also eat that in Cameroon a lot. Now, during long political meetings, do you prefer coffee or tea?
That one is tea.
Which suits you better, early morning walk or late night strategy sessions?
That's a very difficult choice because we do both. I'm not sure which one is more than the other there.
All right. So what is the best advice a friend has ever given you?
The best advice I've ever received from a friend is that I should, out of all these busy schedules, try and create some space for my family.
Great advice there. And if one of your children told you life is tough, what advice would you give them?
I would certainly tell them that, look, they should embrace it as such. They have to work within a tough environment, and then it will change, depending on the effort that they put to change that tough environment.
Interesting. So when do you think you might retire from politics?
Politics, as we know, would involve that you keep an interest in public affairs. The only sort of politics one retires from is that of playing an active role as a leader.
And looking ahead to the next 5 years, are you hopeful about Zimbabwe's future or uncertain?
I'm very hopeful. I'm very, very hopeful. Very hopeful. I mean, Zimbabwe would change. There's so many good people here. And then, of course, this is why those that are in government want to remain there.
Hope is very important.
Yeah, hope is important. But interesting that you are so keen on him retiring. What's up with that?
Well, I just believe that you should always practice what you preach,
Okay.
There are younger people also in the party that can take over and probably do better,
Yeah, sure.
and convince the people even more to vote for them instead of President Mnangagwa. Who knows?
Yes, an important question is, how are Zimbabweans feeling about the current state of the country's politics?
And we heard sentiments earlier from Zimbabweans themselves, with some of them expressing mixed feelings, others very hopeful, others worried about the future of the country. So where constitutional change is to make livelihoods better and not to keep an individual in power. So those are some of the things that the people were talking about.
Yeah, and the consequences that many are leaving the country, Mimi. We've seen the numbers that, the unfavorable political condition which deteriorates, the economic, stand, has led to many Zimbabweans, preferring to work from outside the country and, not contributing the nation-building agenda.
Yeah, I remember Operation Dodula. Most of those that were targeted
as
were Zimbabweans.
Yeah.
So some of them don't even leave because they want to go to Europe or come
South
to
Africa.
Germany. They are leaving to just move to neighboring African countries like South Africa,
That's
Malawi, and other African countries.
Yeah.
But let us find out from Professor Madhuku what this means for him, what this means for Zimbabwe and the future of the country.
The main motivation is the economic performance, which is very low. That economic growth is a result of the political system. So when people leave, they get disappointed that no political action can change the political status quo. That is the relationship. So I would rather want to put it the other way around, saying that it is the economic situation that is leading people to leave, and then that economic situation is itself a product of our politics. Like even now, you need a lot of the activities that we are undertaking, you need a lot of persuasion to be able to convince people that we will succeed. Like in this case, I think we are likely to succeed to stop this government from the proposals that they've put in place.
And when is that change going to happen? Is it anytime soon? Or do you think that there's still uncertainty?
I'm not uncertain. It will happen very soon because now, because of this proposal, which simply would not make sense, there is a very much growing unit of purpose among those that are fighting ZANU-PF. Because the idea of trying to reform or amend a constitution in the manner that is being suggested, it's a level of bankruptcy showing that they've run out of ideas. So they've given us an opportunity to actually unite and get them out of power. So I think people must get hope. In the next 1 year or so, we should be able to be talking about a different Zimbabwe.
Yes, talking about a different Zimbabwe, and it starts with the constitution amendment proposals that are being put forward. And one of the sticking issue is the presidential term limit. What will Zimbabwe, or rather Zimbabweans, do about that?
And also to note that the future remains uncertain but hopeful, because we can see a population that is very, very hopeful, holding power to account and, questioning the constitutional amendment policy that has been put in place by the government.
Yeah, what do you think? Is Zimbabwe protecting its democracy or weakening it?
And what role should the opposition play in shaping the country's future?
Share your thoughts with us in the comment section. Remember, this is Under the Baobab.
And is available on all our digital platforms, including
Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and of course our DW Africa YouTube page, which is DW Africa.
And my name is Mimi Mefoneo.
And I am Jojo Kachi. Many thanks for listening and watching.
Goodbye.